Hey guys, we're continuing with videos about different factions. So now that we're done with the Tau, we'll move to Orks. So the first video is the theorycrafting one, where we'll be talking about the strategies and what kind of ships they have, what kind of upgrades they have available, and then we'll make a fleet composition out of that. So let's just start talking about the ships, and I have of course the spreadsheet that will help us. And the ships that stand out at first are the Orks, because they have a lot of hit points, they are immune to criticals, they are good at boarding, and they just have a ton of guns, and they seem like they're really good, and people often take them, but they're actually not that great. And that is because all those guns, you can see that this is a lot of guns, but they are actually split into multiple firing arcs. So here you can see that they all together they cover 360 degree, but the angle of fire for this gun is only 90 degrees front, which means that you have actually 4 arcs. Like here you can see that you have 3 guns facing this side, you have 3 guns facing this side, 3 guns facing this side, and so on. And this is the same with everything else. With lances, is again you have 2 lances on each side on top, and with torpedoes or with those heavy guns also you have 3 on each side. So actually, whenever you're facing each side, you actually can only fire one of those, 1/4 of those guns. So 3 guns and 2 lances and 3 those guns. But for the chart I actually counted 2 of them, so because in most cases you should be able to kind of position the rock in a way that allows you to fire from 2 sides at once. So this calculation here considers that you are firing from 2 sides at once. So even if you fire from 2 sides at once, you can see that they are pretty good at cost effectiveness compared to other ships, but not to other Ork ships. They are actually very expensive compared to other Ork ships, so they're actually not that tough. Of course, they're immune to critical, so they are tougher than this value shows. But the DPS they bring is actually kind of poor. You would need to be firing at 3 sides at once, or even 4, for them to be really worth the DPS cost value, because they're very expensive. They also have pretty poor turrets per cost. They're expensive, but they don't have that many turrets, and they have kind of mediocre troops per cost too, which is really like not really good for Orks, because if you just leave them alone they can be boarded, and it actually might be worth it for the enemy to do this. And they're also very slow, so the Mega Orks are just completely disqualified because they're just extremely slow, so you cannot get close to them. Most of their guns are very close range, the heavy ones, so it's just totally not worth it. The other ones have very similar DPS to cost and HP to cost, and other values are actually slightly better. So if anything, the big rocks are kind of average, so they are actually not bad like the big mega rocks, but the big rocks are still not very good. And actually the only rocks that you should be considered even are the normal ones, the smallest ones, because they're actually much cheaper than the other ones. They still have a ton of hit points. You can see that they actually have more hit point per cost than the other ones. They're still immune to criticals, and they're actually much faster than the other ones, and they are actually the fastest Ork ship, so they're even faster than Ork escorts. They are really pretty good all around, so those actually do provide a decent value. So if you want to take any of those rocks, then the normal rocks are the best one, because they're the fastest and you can actually get them in range, because Orks have those heavy guns which have miserable accuracy, and they only work in short range. So unless you get to this short range and start to utilize these guns, they are not gonna be efficient. Those are pretty good if you close in, but again the short range makes them questionable if you cannot, so that's why you take only those, because only those rocks have the speed to reliably close in. If you take mega rocks, yeah, they have a lot of guns, but with this speed you're never gonna use them because enemy is just faster. That's why the small rocks are the best, and they actually have the best toughness per cost value, which is also important. And of course the big rocks are all in one chunk, so you're not gonna lose the DPS if you get hit, like lose half of the health of Mega Rock and it still has all the firepower. But if you take 2 rocks instead and one of them dies, you lose half of the firepower. That kind of sucks, but the increased HP per cost and the increased speed makes it still worth it. So rocks are still much better than the Mega Rocks, even if you consider that you lose DPS over time once you lose them compared to the Mega Rocks. But rocks are okay, but they're still not the best ships that Orks have. They have some ships with base, but the base are generally overpriced on pretty much every faction. So ships with base tend to just be too expensive. Like, look at this. This dreadnought costs 300, and you can have a perfectly fine dreadnought without base for 1/3 of the cost less. So you just get 50% more stuff for losing the base and exchanging them for firepower. So again, this is not really that great. And also you have choices between torpedoes and those double barrel mega cannon artilleries, which are almost the same actually. Like, the torpedoes provide higher burst, but they're limited, and they're kind of hard to hit. And those things, they also have miserable accuracy, but they do a ton of damage. But I estimate that over time they will do the same amount of damage as torpedoes, and you can actually, if you do use a lock-on stance, which we will be using all the time because Orks have terrible accuracy, so those cannons with lock-on actually extend their range to 9,000, and they still have 20% accuracy there, which might sound like not a lot, but if you have that many DPS there, even 20% of the DPS is still kind of significant. So overall, I estimate that those double barrel mega cannon artilleries are better than torpedoes, because you have a lot of ships which are completely identical, except one has torpedoes and the other one has this double barrel mega cannon artillery. So I recommend every time pretty much the mega cannon ones, since they require less micromanagement. You don't have to line up the torpedoes, which actually will be hard, as you'll see later. And they just provide almost the same damage, except more reliably. It's more spread over time, but during the whole match they should give you better value overall. And like they said, the cost is the same, everything else is the same about those ships, except one has torpedoes and the other has the mega cannon. So yeah, I picked the ones that do not have base and the ones that have mega cannons, and when we look at the chart, what do we actually see? All of the ships are pretty tough. They give less value the smaller the ship is, so biggest dreadnought gives you the highest DPS per cost compared to smaller ones. So in this case, bigger ships are actually better for Orks because they give you more guns per cost. But there is one ship that actually stands out by a lot. Like this thing, this Onslaught, which is an escort, has absolutely insane DPS per cost. It has higher DPS per cost than anything. It's higher DPS than Shadows, which are like the best ships for Eldar, and it even has higher DPS than the Eldar battleships, even if you increase that, because this does not include the bonus for the lock-on stance to lances. So even if you get the lock-on stance for lances and double this value, it's still gonna be lower than the goddamn Onslaught. So this ship is just like, and it also has like extremely high HP per cost, again comparable to even Necron ships. So it's extremely tough to kill, has extremely high damage. The profile of the damage is also pretty good. It just has front cannon and nothing else, which is good because most of the time enemy will be just running away from you and you'll be chasing them. So this is like the perfect angle. You'll be utilizing it most of the time. The poor accuracy of course sucks, but with lock and stance is actually not that terrible. And if you just take all your points into as many onslaughts as possible, you just completely destroy every single enemy without even trying. Like, this is stupidly overpowered and just really ridiculous. So you can also consider other ships, and of course there is an escort limit, so you actually have to think what else to take to make space for the escorts, and you get 2 points for each light cruiser, 3 points for a cruiser, 4 points, no, it's still 3 for battle cruiser, right? Yeah, it's still 3, so you don't want battle cruisers because cruisers give you the same 3 escort limit, and that dreadnoughts give you 5. So based on this chart, we kind of want dreadnoughts because they have a lot of firepower, but at the same time they're slow, so we don't really want them. And killers are also very serviceable, and they're faster, and they actually provide you more slots, because you can take 2 of those killers and it's 6 points. 1470 actually, it's actually almost the same, so it doesn't really matter what you take, but you should take one dreadnought for a flagship, because Orks have very poor morale. They have minus 50 bravery, which sucks a lot. So if your flagship dies, you take a big hit to your whole fleet. So you almost certainly want your flagship to be a dreadnought, so it's just harder to kill, because if you take a smaller ship, it's easier to kill, and you do not have running silence, so you cannot just keep your ship in running silent and hide it somewhere in the corner, so it's never can be killed. And you also kind of want it together with your fleet to use the rally, because you'll be using it basically on cooldown just to keep up the morale of your fleet, because there is no way the enemy has enough firepower to kill all the onslaught. There's been so many of those onslaught that is absolutely impossible to kill them all before the timer runs out. The only way to win against orcs is on morale. And yeah, so you can either take 3 dreadnoughts and then the rest of the onslaughts, something like that. Well, yeah, maybe not that many, but yeah, something like that. But then it comes down to 15, and then you have to take the killer, and then yeah, you cannot. So the composition that I actually figured out is this one, and it has 1 dreadnought, 4 killers, and this many onslaughts. So this is what I actually prefer, because you get a lot of the most hit points, because the killers are actually slightly more efficient than dreadnoughts on hit points, and they're less susceptible to morale, and it just creates like a fear factor in the enemy because they see so many red dots. But you can also use the dreadnoughts here to replace those killers, and it's gonna be the same. But I don't like the slowness of the dreadnoughts because they're kind of slow, and the biggest problem is catching to the enemy because they just run away all the time. Yeah, so this is my recommended composition. You could do some other things, but onslaughts are just so much better than anything else in the game. Like, they're just the toughest, the most DPS, the good firing arc for them, extremely good turrets per cost, extremely good troop value per cost. They're like the highest troop value per cost. The point that they're just way too cheap. They should cost like 40 or something like that. They are way undercosted, and I expect them to be patched to be more expensive, because you just get so much value for those 29 points that it's just crazy. You should take as many of those as possible, because they get 8 DPS. You have 2 shots for 8 damage divided by 4 seconds times twice, which is 8 DPS. So this is like extremely high. Like I said, the Crude War Sphere gets 24, and so 3 of those guys have the same DPS as the War Sphere, and they cost a fraction of it. So and War Sphere is actually perfectly average, but even if you consider like an Elder ship gets the other one, the shadow one, which only has DPS, yeah, it is 24. So just 3 of those get the same DPS as a full large LR battle cruiser, not counting torpedoes. But again, they're just so cheap that it's absolutely insane. Yeah, you just want as many of those as possible. So just take 15 of those and enough other ships to increase escort limit to that. You can maybe fit 16 of those, I guess, if you really try different combinations. Maybe use a light cruiser somewhere instead of a big cruiser, but again, it doesn't really matter at this point, because this is just so ridiculous that nothing is gonna stand a chance anyway. Okay, so let's talk the upgrades. You actually have different factions, and each of those has different upgrades. Let's just go through them. Asteroid immunity is meh. Scavenging, it's not very good. Like you kind of board a lot and kill some ships by boarding, but it's just not significant at all. Big guns, it's only for the flagship. You have extremely shitty accuracy, so the extra range is gonna be in a accuracy bracket that is basically worthless. So this is just completely useless. DPS, how many does it do? The Dreadnought has 15 turrets, so that's 7.5 DPS, which is 1 onslaught. So again, upgrade which gives you DPS to 1 onslaught is not really that good. More thrusters is only for battleships, so it's useless because you don't really use that many battleships. You mostly focus on onslaught, and again, 10 seconds is not that significant, so just not really great. Scooper zaps, again, this doesn't really do anything. It kind of helps with processing the shocking zap, but shocking zap is actually, like, people think it's extremely good, but it's actually not super good. So this by extension is not good. Like you should only consider even taking it at all if you use this, but yeah, it's just another build. This is actually extremely good because you have extremely bad accuracy, and the only thing that allows you to do damage is the lock-on stance. Without lock-on stance, your damage drops to abysmal levels. So you want this extra deck so that you can use lock-on all the time, even if your deck is destroyed. So you keep up your DPS. And custom shields is another kinda okayish upgrade. Shield regeneration is increased, but it's not that great actually. This is the second upgrade that you really want and the best one. The songs, which enhance rally, and they give you immunity to morale loss for 30 seconds, which is a long time. So once you close into the enemy and get into ramming range where a lot of ramming is gonna occur, you should use this to be immune to morale, since ramming is what inflicts the most morale loss, and without this it's much harder to keep up your morale, which is terrible, and this is the only way you can lose, if you lose your morale, and you're losing rally on cooldown every time it is available after you start fighting. So this is gonna give you really a lot of value and allow you to kind of easily keep the morale up. Shocking Zap is kind of okay on paper because it's for 2 seconds and the lances have 16-second cooldown, so it provides 1/8 of an uptime. So with 8 lances, in theory, you should be able to slow down one of the ships by 50% indefinitely, but in practice the lance cooldowns will never match up, they will gonna overlap. So at most you can get maybe like 1/3 or a half uptime on this thing, so it decreases the enemy speed by effectively by like 20 or 30%, which is just not that good for an upgrade. And you also need to change your fleet composition to ships that have those lances, because the best ships actually do not have lances, and you have to use those slightly less good ships to use this. So this is just nah. And then we have the unique faction upgrades. This is useless, like I mentioned, because it's just the identification range and not the detection range. This is only for the flagship, so again it does almost nothing because you just have so many ships and your DPS is not concentrated like for other factions. So just ability that applies only to the flagship is useless. Then you have commander training, which is funny because you can actually hide all your ships, so then it has no idea that you have 20 ships on field, and it just suddenly they get revealed and they just, what the fuck is going on? So it's nice to surprise the enemy, but it's not really that useful because you're not relying on hiding anywhere. You just rush the enemy with so many ships that there is nothing they can do. 5 damage per boarding action is again almost nothing, so it's useless. This one, this is actually one of the better ones, since you increase the maneuverability by a bit, and you get a much bigger speed boost. So this is one of the okay ones, but and this one is also additional damage. So I usually just take this one, or actually stick with the shields even, because but yeah, let's just pick this one, I guess, for the tryout later. And for the abilities, you have the shields overload, which might be actually not that bad this case, because we do have a dreadnought as our flagship, and we do need him to survive because he's very important to us. If he dies, we lose a lot of morale and probably lose. So this helps us keep this very important ship alive. So this is okay. Bomb is kind of meh. We do get our damage elsewhere. Status bomb is also kind of okay, but not necessary. And there is a better choice pretty much objectively in the tractor cannon, which allows us to drag a single ship and a bit of a distance. The distance here is shown as 1, 2, 3, 4 units, but so it's a 1000 and a bit, which doesn't sound like a lot, and it isn't actually a lot. But the biggest value of this is that the enemy ship cannot move during this time, and it takes like 3 seconds to drag this distance. So what actually gives you the most benefit is not this distance moved, but the fact that for the 3 seconds while the tractor cannon is dragging the enemy cannot move away. So you also gain whatever movement that they would have done during those 3 seconds, which adds to this distance that you drag them, and this becomes pretty significant. And you also can take Novacan, which is a cheap knockoff, and it does almost 0 damage, so it's useless. It's like 1/3 of the effectiveness of the original Novacan, more like 1/4 even. So it's just completely worthless. This thing it's kind of okay. It's just extra attack. It's gonna be on the flagship, so it does like 6 damage. So 6 troop damage from time to time is okay, especially against Eldar and other annoying ships. It goes through shields and hollow fields, so it is kind of useful for those situations. And this thing raises critical assault chance by 100%, which might sound good, but critical assault chances are actually not that great. Because this is not a chance to do critical damage and the module damage, like destroy the deck or generator. This actually is this thing, which means that you just do extra troop damage, but you don't actually damage any modules or anything. So with 100% critical chance, you would do +3 damage on every battleship and +2 on cruiser and so on. So battleship does 12 damage by default on boarding. So with critical that's +3, so that's +25%. So this 100 critical chance translates to +25% boarding troop damage. It is a bit higher, it's +50% for lightning strikes. So this might be okay, but with this composition where we just take all the onslaughts, we actually do not have that many boarding actions to depopulate the enemy, and we just rely on raw damage instead of boardings to kill them. So we don't need this. The rocket probe is, again, we just have so many escorts that we have infinite scans, so there's no need to take anything that reveals the enemy. So the choice is like this is mandatory, and the other choice is up to you. It can be statist, can be shock attack, and it can be overload shields. Any of those is okay. So we actually have pretty good variety of upgrades to pick from, and none of them are really mandatory, except the tractor cannon is extremely good. But all the other ones are just, you can pick mostly whatever you want and still be effective. There's nothing that you absolutely rely on. And you also can make a different composition with not with escorts but with other ships, and I tried it, but it's just not as effective. It is okay, but just onslaughts are so extremely good. Like if you look at this is just absolutely broken and ridiculous. So this is just way stronger. After the nerf it, I might make another video to try out the boarding composition and more like balanced one with bigger ships, but right now the onslaught is just absolutely devastating, and it wins against everything, and nothing comes even close to defeating this. And yeah, we're gonna try it out in the next video, so look forward to that.